We've been married 11 years. Yep. We have 5 children, which of course, as soon as you're talking about NFP, like, see, it doesn't work. No, pretty much all the kids were very much planned.
I mean, really, it's become the foundation for our family. We spent so much time discerning natural family planning when we were dating and when we were first married. That then grew into a real openness to how are we going to prioritize our family as the number one thing in our life. Natural family planning has influenced conversations that we've had about careers. It's influenced how much time we spend together. Finances, our prayer life, even our family prayer life. But really what has grown out of our commitment to natural family planning is a team mentality for our kids, where we're the coaches and we're all a part of Team Zlatic. If you would have told me 15 years ago that I would be using natural family planning as a foundation for our marriage and for our family, I would have laughed and said, that's crazy. But through my relationship with Paul, and as we have continued to grow together, natural family planning truly has become not just the foundation for our marriage, not just our family planning method, but really just a phenomenal surprise of great love and beauty over the course of our family creation. Originally, I didn't want to do hormonal birth control. It actually, I came to it through the green movement a little bit more than maybe through the church. And I was nervous about putting things that were unnatural in my body, and was uncomfortable about that. Was also uncomfortable with the idea of using condoms or using diaphragms or things like that, because they did not seem very effective and seemed to create this barrier that I was not comfortable with. And so when we began to talk about marriage, we started to explore lots of different family planning methods, and also sought the wisdom of the church on how we were going to do family planning, and we were introduced to natural family planning. One of the funnier moments in hindsight is when my dad found out that natural family planning was becoming important to Paul and I, and he said, "They're still doing that rhythm method thing?" And that was his stereotype of what natural family planning was and what the church taught about family planning. I've found through the years that my dad is not the only one who continues to hold that stereotype. We've known, unfortunately, nurses and doctors and friends and family members who have assumed that that's what natural family planning is, and it is not. It's instead a fertility awareness method that has helped many people to achieve pregnancy if you struggle with infertility, or to postpone pregnancy if you do not feel open to life or do not feel prepared to welcome children into your family at that particular time.
Bill and I had both been previously married, and our marriage is annulled. We both have children from those previous marriages. We both have 2 children each.
We had come from previous marriages, and we did not use NFP for a time in those marriages, and we felt like it was not helpful to our marriage at all. We felt like using NFP would be much healthier for us, and it's proved to be.
We have to communicate with each other about what's happening, what days are fertile and what days are not, and how we feel about those things. It
does force you to develop a discipline and not give in to all your physical desires. It creates a healthy control of those desires, and at the same time, when you do get to enjoy it, it makes it that much more special.
The gift of our married sexuality has two equally beautiful and holy parts that together make that gift complete. The church teaches that these two parts are both important parts of the whole, and they shouldn't be separated. Every act of sexual intercourse should be open to both unity and life. Now, the church's goal is not to tell people how many children they should have or how to control their sex lives, but to help them to find truth and happiness. Living according to God's plan, even where sex is concerned, will bring lasting joy that momentary pleasures will not. It's from love and concern for us, our marriages, and our family that the church teaches the truth, that both parts of the marital act are good and necessary for happiness and unity in marriage. The key is that we trust God to know what's best for us. At the same time, the church also encourages us to be good stewards of our fertility and to be responsible parents and to consider our ability to provide for those children spiritually, emotionally, physically, and financially before we have children. NFP is a tool that allows us to do both. So, what's the difference between using artificial birth control and NFP? In NFP, we don't reject or act against our fertility, and we don't break that link between the two purposes of sex, love and life. We follow the natural patterns of the body's fertility and infertility, patterns placed there by God Himself. With NFP, we make choices and sacrifices for God and for each other. With NFP, if there are serious reasons to avoid pregnancy, the couple may choose to abstain from intercourse during those few fertile days of a woman's cycle and postpone their sexual intimacy until the end of the fertile phase. They don't reject any part of the gift that God blesses them with. They together make that intentional decision to, using my previous example, wait to have intercourse until they're ready to accept and enjoy the blessings of God's entire gift. Now, when using NFP, Bill and I are still open to life. Each time we wish to come together physically, we, as a couple, evaluate our situation and decide whether to abstain or not. When we choose to abstain, we don't view the potential of conceiving a child as never, no way, ever, but as it would be wise to avoid conceiving at this particular time.
We dated for 7 years before getting married in 1998. We have 4 children, all boys. Our oldest is 17, going to be 17 shortly. We have a 13-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
I think there's some worry, am I going to screw it up? and so really learning how to be confident in what I was doing was important. And then of course when you get sick, you're like, okay, is that messing things up? Am I doing it right? Eventually I stopped doing a lot of the signs because I knew my body so well I could tell.
It helps when you are engaged as the man in the situation, right? It forced me to be more communicative about what was going on at any given time with her body and how we were feeling. So I think it really does help communication in your marriage.
And I think it helps you explore other ways to be intimate outside of the actual act of sex. So yeah, we actually probably wouldn't have done that had we not been using NFP.
We used it to delay a pregnancy just before our second son, Owen, because we financially could not support a second child. When Melinda was about to finish her fellowship, we decided that it was time again to try. We were able to get pregnant quickly after beginning to try because of NFP. When we lost our second child early in the pregnancy, Melinda figured out very quickly from her NFP charts that the loss was likely a result of something called a luteal phase defect.
That is, the period of time after my ovulation was too short and the lining of my uterus did not grow properly each month. This makes it difficult to become or remain pregnant. When we got pregnant about 3 months later, I abruptly sought medical attention, convincing the doctor that he should test me for progesterone levels. And when he did, he found them to be way too low and prescribed progesterone until I was 12 weeks along. And this helped us to maintain my lining and maintain my pregnancy, and now we have Owen.
We've been married 11 years, and we have 4 children.
Our oldest is 10, and then our youngest is 3. So we have 2 boys and 2 girls. And Rob is a family doctor, and I stay home with the kids. I think one of the hardest parts is learning how to do it correctly and understanding all the signs. And there are great books out there along with the classes, and I reread the chapter on mucus and just the chapters that I needed to read over and over again to understand what the signs were, and that really helped me.
It is a lot of hard work. You know, it's something that you have to invest time into. If you're putting that much work into that part of your marriage, how much more work you can put in the rest of your marriage? First of all, so I'm a family doctor, and one question I always ask a lot of my teenager patients is, what is the only way not to get someone pregnant? And a lot of times they'll say a condom or birth control. I say, no, not having sex. There's no artificial method that's 100% effective. I think that's always something I try to encourage my patients to understand. And there's really, as I said before, no artificial method that's any more effective than NFP when used correctly. So a couple things about artificial contraception. So pills or hormonal treatment, such as insertable devices as well that use hormones, have multiple risk factors. One, they can increase risk for clots in the body. So those clots can occur in the legs or the lungs, and those can be life-threatening. So it's definitely something I always encourage my patients to think about as a big risk factor, and that increases significantly with smoking as well. It also hormonally alters a woman's body. So it can affect appetite, weight, mood, skin, and those are all risk factors because you're actually putting hormones in your body that are not necessarily meant to be there. Many birth control pills also work on two different ways, or birth control methods in general. So there's estrogen and progesterone. And so there's dual or combined contraceptive pills that work, and then there's also progesterone-only pills as well as insertable devices. And there's two different ways that these work because of the two hormones. Estrogen inhibits ovulation, so the egg doesn't get released. But the second one, progesterone, what that does is it doesn't allow the endometrium or the uterus to accept the baby. So basically, conception can happen within the fallopian tube, and then the baby can end up being aborted because the progesterone doesn't allow the baby to implant. And so, according to the Catholic Church, you know, that's a very serious thing because abortion is happening with the progesterone-only methods. And that's something I let all my patients know, and we do a lot of counseling on, letting people know that there are two different ways that these hormone methods work. As for other devices like condoms, that interrupts the lovemaking in a marriage, and as Ashley mentioned before, you know, that's interrupting the unity of the sexual intercourse. Other methods such as withdrawal methods or incomplete intercourse, really studies have shown are not very effective. And plus, a lot of these put the responsibility on one person, versus when we talk about NFP, it's really something we have to do together.
We talk about it every single day. Am I fertile? Am I not fertile? What are the signs telling us? It's a conversation that makes us talk about our fertility, and our intimacy deepens each time we talk about it. For me, so amazing that God gave us this body that shows us our fertility. Pretty obvious if you pay attention. I didn't pay attention until we got married. I didn't realize what my body was doing. But when I learned about NFP, it's like, wow, there's definitely mucus on this day. There's definitely no mucus on this day. And the changes of it are very obvious. But I didn't realize that until I started studying the signs.
NFP is not a method in itself. It's an umbrella term, and that includes many different natural methods, but they all basically work the same way: observing, charting, and analyzing those natural physical changes in a woman's body. It's amazing what clear insight we can get about fertility just by charting those simple signs that our body gives us every day. Now, Bill and I use the Symptothermal Method because it doesn't rely heavily on just a single sign of fertility, but it's cross-checked with several signs. So every day, I take my temperature first thing in the morning, and I notice any changes in secretion and cervix when I use the restroom. Now, some people keep paper charts, but I log my observations in an app on my phone. And it creates a chart for me and helps us pinpoint those days when I'm fertile, and it keeps a record of my cycles. We apply the NFP rules to identify those days and decide whether we abstain or not, and we make a mutual decision. Now, at this point in our lives, we don't need to do a lot of discussion about this, and we're very conservative about the days we use. If we were younger, though, we would need to communicate more about if we would want to use those borderline fertile days, if and when we would want to try to conceive. We do still communicate, though, and Bill can log on and see our charts on the app at any time, and I can share those charts with an instructor or a doctor if we have any questions. Now, I need to caution you about using fertility apps. Apps are only tools, they're not methods. Some fertility apps are based on the ineffective rhythm method. Sometimes they have inaccurate algorithms or unproven science, and they're not effective. There are others that are reputable, but they're only a tool for charting. They're not a method in themselves. You need to learn how to correctly observe, record, and interpret those physical signs. And you need to understand the method itself, and that requires training from an instructor. You don't want your fertility decisions being made by an app.
I struggle with my attitude, and most guys I know, even married, struggle with a greater desire for sex than their wives. My experience is that what I've heard from most men is something like this. Well, you get married so that you can have sex. And the unspoken implication is that it's unlimited. Add to this the scripture that states we should not deny our spouses. And it sounds like a very convincing reason to have unlimited sex at any cost. In the past, this was a huge struggle for me, and it took me probably a decade of hard work to learn how to have the right attitude. In my first marriage, I recognized that my attitude towards my wife was unhealthy because of my desire for sex. I wasn't involved with pornography, unfaithfulness, or any sexual sin. I was only sinning in my thoughts. But I knew and God knew. Because we were using artificial birth control, I mentally justified my wife as available at all times for my sexual pleasure and blamed her for any times that I could not have sex when I wanted it. God and I knew that it affected the way I related to my wife. It took the form of bitterness and resentment. I tried to change by myself. I even prayed for it. But God had to bring out the big guns. I had to humble myself and get help from other people and face-to-face help. I got help at a place called Sexaholics Anonymous. It was very humbling. I came to the point where I was willing to take the exposure to others' thoughts. Some people made false judgments about me. I felt terribly guilty, ashamed, and very sad about my situation. I knew I was hurting my wife and inadvertently my family. I wanted to stand before God and say that I had done everything that I could to follow His ways and love my wife. It motivated me, and it made me realize that my attitude was a serious sin. It helped break my self-righteousness and put me in my place, a good place.
One of the things that I particularly liked and grew to understand that is very true about NFP is it takes both people. Some women really have painful cycles. Well, if you're a husband that's attuned to that, you know where your wife is at, and it's not just her thing to deal with, it's our thing as a couple. And so there's so many positive things. It really allows a relationship to grow, sometimes in very unexpected ways. Having sex is great, but also not having sex can be great. That during those times of natural abstinence, if you're not looking to conceive, it allows you to do different things, to schedule a date night, to play a game, watch a movie, give a back rub, different things that don't have to be sex. And so it allows different elements to grow. The divorce rate among NFP users is almost non-existent, about 0.2%. And why is that? Because NFP, as an aspect of marriage, calls you to sacrifice, to understand the other, to be open, to do lots of things that just builds good relationship, whether you're having sex or not.
I think that NFP really helps us to discern our decisions. And I have many friends, and even at different points of my own life, thought that you considered having children when you were financially stable enough, when your education was complete and it was a good time in your career, or maybe you felt prepared to be a parent. And all those statements, you're never going to be in a perfect place then to have children. And, or I never would have been in a perfect place to have children. But what the church encourages us instead is to be open to life. And when you're open to life, your yes creates an opportunity for things to grow. And when I look back on our journey with natural family planning, there are so many times when I would have said, we aren't prepared to be parents, we can't financially support another child, I don't feel adequate enough. And instead, we feel that we were asked to be open. And we have seen just small examples throughout our marriage, and there probably will be many more, where this has created a family team atmosphere for our children and us. We now have 5 boys, and I could have never written this story. This is God's story unfolding, and there are members who probably wouldn't have been on the team if we wouldn't have been open to life.
We want to encourage you to look into the classes and to consider NFP for your relationship. Learning from other couples or from an instructor is the best way to learn, even if you feel a little strange about the idea at first. It really is a more personal form of instruction. The charting of fertility signs is monitored and refined by someone with years of experience.
We recommend that you don't use do-it-yourself courses unless they're absolutely necessary. Effectiveness can be substantially reduced, as well as your confidence, by using and not having the right training. A lot of couples have a lot of fears using FP, but knowledge is power and can help you overcome your fears.
Personal instruction also allows you to get answers to all of your questions with no guesswork. It allows you and your fiancé to be more confident that you make the decisions often about your readiness for children, and allow your marriage to have a freedom and a richness that oral contraception and barriers do not offer. And it allows you to open your lives to a greater trust in God and His will for you and your family.
At this time, Al and I really don't desire a 5th child, but we are open to God's will and could easily allow it using NFP.
It's so special to know within that when you're trying to achieve pregnancy. I mean, we know pretty much when we conceived our kids because we were aware of that. And that's very sacred and very special to us. Is it difficult? Yeah, it can be difficult. Yeah, it can be a challenge. Yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes. I mean, what part of life isn't, though? Anything that's worth doing usually is a little difficult and requires a challenge and some sacrifice.
So I think it's something it's a commitment to each other, but it also shows you how much are you really committing to this relationship, this sacrament that we have to each other. And I think that's why NFP is so difficult, but so rewarding and powerful at the same time.